Oh, I'm really challenged technologically. I'd like to call to order for the Santa Barbara County Association of Governments for the meeting of Thursday, March 21st, 2019. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Director Williams? Hart? Here.
I'll be here too.
Hartman?
Here.
Adam? Levanino? Here. Clark? Here. Mosby? Here. Waite? Here. Perotti?
Here.
Sierra?
Here.
Julian?
Here.
Murillo?
Here.
And Chair Patino? Here.
So could you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And Ms. Contreras, can you please read the public comment portion of the agenda?
The public may address the Santa Barbara County Association of Governments on any subject within the jurisdiction of the board that is not included as part of this agenda. Comments shall be limited to 15 minutes, divided among those desiring to speak, but no person shall speak longer than 3 minutes.
Are there any, there's no request to speak?
We have no public comment.
What about up in North County?
Doesn't look like it.
None? Okay. So we're moving on to the consent calendar. And do we have any requests to speak on the consent calendar?
We have no consent public comment.
Okay. Any of the directors want anything pulled or any comments on the consent calendar?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
move to approve.
Okay, I have a motion to approve.
Second.
I have a second to approve. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Madam Clerk, would you like to call the roll?
Director Williams? Aye. Hart? Aye. Hartman? Aye. Levanino? Abstain. Waite?
Yes.
Julian?
Aye.
Mosby? Aye. Perotti? Abstain. Clark? Aye. Murillo?
Aye.
Sierra?
Aye.
And Chair Patino?
I couldn't hear what.
Chair Patino.
Oh, okay. Aye.
Motion passes 10-02.
I'm sorry. I'm not getting that. I guess maybe it's because of the microphone here. Okay, moving on to item number 5. Could you please read item number 5?
Item 5, Regional Transportation Plan Sustainable Community Strategy Schedule. Receive a presentation on the schedule for the 2021 Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy Update, as well as key milestones that will be brought to the SBCAG board.
Okay, and the staff report will be given by Mr. Orfila.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of the board. So this item comes before you this morning. It's just an update on what staff is doing on preparing for the next step update on our regional transportation plan and sustainable community strategy. And so what you have attached to the staff report is just the schedule moving forward on the next, the work that we'll be doing over the next 2.5 years from today moving forward. So I'm going to draw your attention to the screen over here, and we prepared a schedule for you. And I'll go over some of the major work tasks that are associated with the RTP SCS. So the first item, I guess, that we've done is the regional growth forecast. That's something that the board approved in January 2019. And a little bit later this year, we'll be bringing to you the public participation plan. And so the items that you see up here in blue on the schedule are the items that we will be bringing to the board, like I said, over the next 2.5 years. Also we'll be bringing to you the goals and objectives for the plan. You'll be seeing that in the summertime this year. And then we're going back and working at the staff level on some of the other items on the plan. And then starting in 2020, we'll be going almost at a full-time basis in the planning division, working on the updating the transportation network working on developing the RTP project list, and working on the RHNA, the Regional Housing Needs Assessment. And then we're also going out to the public and requesting their feedback on these growth scenarios that we'll be looking at in our sustainable community strategy. And so we'll be bringing back those growth scenarios and working with the Joint Technical Advisory Committee and seeing how those different growth scenarios perform. And you'll see us again in November 2020, and we'll be asking you for a preferred growth scenario. And then we'll go back in 2020, the beginning of 2021, and preparing our plan and environmental, and coming back to you in the summer of 2021 and preparing that final plan and the final environmental document. So that's the schedule, and we'll be busy over the next 2.5 years, and I'd be happy to answer any questions on the schedule.
Any questions? Mr. Lavanino?
Thank you. So, you know, the governor has talked about withholding SB1 funding for those folks that don't. Now, my question is it this sustainable community strategy that he's interested in, or was it just the regional housing needs?
I'm going to defer to either our planning manager or Margie to answer the question regarding the governor's.
Mr. Lavanino, it's related to what we know now is it's housing elements that are approved. And every jurisdiction in Santa Barbara County currently has an approved housing element. The governor may come out with something related to housing production. We don't know that. But at this point, everybody is compliant with the RHNA process. So we'll see how the laws change and react accordingly.
Thank you. All right.
Any other questions? Oh, Director Williams.
So to Mr. Lavanino's question, there was a decent amount of discussion at a conference that Holly, myself, Sarkis, and our executive director were at this last weekend. The governor's folks that were there said there's no plans on SB1, but that they are looking at other carrots and sticks on housing production. They still seem serious. I think the conclusion was simply that there had been a covenant on SB1, and that would be not the right stick to use.
Well, I'm going to believe that, even though it looks like you're at the kid table.
I know. I think I need to get a different chair to be taken seriously today.
Any other questions? Okay, Director Hart.
Yeah, just to add to that, you know, we were fortunate yesterday at the lobby day up in Sacramento with Director Kern and Mr. Kocek and Gus Corey, our lobbyist, and Holly Sierra. And we met with the governor and talked specifically about this. And he was very direct and said, you know, I think the reading between the lines was there was a trial balloon that was floated that made that linkage, and it was not well received. And everyone recognizes that the compact with the voters about SB1 revenues are something that should not be touched, but that there is a connection between housing production and local government's ability to do that and make that happen, and the state's interest in addressing the housing crisis. So there's going to be a dialogue, and there's going to be a task force, and there's going to be discussion and time to figure out how to do that. But you know, it is clear that there is a connection made in Sacramento between those things, and that we need to be prepared and thinking about that and reacting to that. But they were very explicit to say that they understand the issue about SB1 revenues, and that is not an appropriate tool, and they promise not to go into that direction.
Thank you. Okay, no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Orfa. And moving on, any public comment?
We have no public comment.
None?
No.
None from up north either?
Don't believe there's any up north.
Okay. Moving on to item number 6.
Could I before that, just take the board's indulgence to make a motion to reconsider consent calendar item C. I'm behind the 8 ball. but I brought it up before. It was our transit needs assessment. I think I've articulated ad nauseum why I feel like this is a dishonest process, not the least which because our executive director, last time we discussed it, just articulated a concrete transit need that we do have, which is increased service for the Clean Air Express from North County. And so I have talked to the county Public Works, which is the only entity still asking for this dishonest process to go forward. And Mr. McGulpin is going to withdraw the request. So I actually think there is no reason for us to do this. So I would ask for reconsideration for the item, and at least have a separate vote. But I don't think there's any reason to continue if the last entity that's going to do it is going to withdraw their request.
Well, I'll whatever we have to do to make a motion to allow you to reconsider so that you could vote. We could have a separate vote on it.
That would be fine. Okay. Okay, I have a motion. I have a motion and a second to reconsider Mr. Williams' request. Madam,
Do you know what is the actual motion?
to reconsider
item C.
So not approving it?
Well, you'd need to have a vote to reconsider, and
reconsider.
then you'd vote on re-vote on item C.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Director Williams?
Aye.
Hart? Aye. Hartman? Aye. Lavanino? Aye. Waite?
Yes.
Julian?
Aye.
Mosby? Aye. Perotti? Aye. Clark? Aye. Murillo?
No.
Sierra? Aye. And Chair Patino?
Aye.
Motion passes in 11-1.
Okay.
So this is your opportunity now. The substance of the motion. This is your opportunity to, number one, say no to the county, which I know a lot of you guys like to do occasionally. Number two, to stand up for transit, and number three, to have zero consequence for either one of those because the county's going to withdraw the request anyway. So there's no need for us to go through what every year is a painfully strange logic to say that there's no unmet transit needs when we know that there are transit needs, particularly for commuters from the North County to the south.
Ms. Kern.
Madam Chairperson, members of the board, I just want to clarify. The finding is that there are no unmet transit needs reasonable to meet, and that reasonable to meet definition is your definition for us to use to evaluate those unmet needs. We are not saying that there are no unmet needs. We're saying there are unmet needs that are not reasonable to meet. I know, kind of double negative issue, but there.
Totally understand. It's just the gap.
It's semantics.
The gap that is between the definitions and speak that we use and what the public uses as common sense is sometimes a large gulf. And in this case, I think this is an ancient and bad process that started when we were an enormously rural county. The only reason why this is supposed to be in place is for very rural counties with low populations. We're no longer a low population county, but it's a vestige of an old law that unfortunately hasn't been changed. And I don't think we should participate in what is, to me, a fundamentally dishonest process of declaring unmet transit needs so that one of our jurisdictions, in this case my jurisdiction, can raid transit money to use for non-transit purposes.
And as I can appreciate that, and I think we have discussed probably 2 or 3 times since I've been on the SBCAG board, the definition, and we've always gone back to this. So it may be archaic, but we've always had a majority of the degrees that, yeah, it's the unmet transit need, whether it's reasonable to meet or not, and whether it's fiscally responsible to do so. Anyway, Mr. Lavanino, I saw you.
Thank you. It would have been nice if the county was here, County Public Works. Oh, you are. I can't. Look, these things right here. Boom, I can see Rachel was the only one. All right.
Okay.
Can you address that, please?
Good morning, Brittany Heaton with Santa Barbara County Public Works. And yes, what Director Williams is saying is true. This year, as the county puts in their TDA claim, the $100,000 that in the last few years has been set aside for streets and roads will be put to transit. It's a little bit, there's a nuance. The money didn't actually go to streets and roads. It was part of a agreement and arrangement that we had with some of the transit providers to provide other types of funding to piece together a program that worked. So in this case, we are changing our claim, and so we will no longer be required to do this process.
Okay, so I guess then the question is to Rachel, then if we have no entities that are seeking to subvert these dollars, then we don't have to have a hearing and go through the process? Or do we still have to have the hearing?
Madam Chair and Director,
Yes.
Madam Chair, Director Lavanino. So the board is required to make these findings if any claimant is going to use it for streets and roads. At this point, the entities haven't submitted their claims. So, and we do need to do this before August. So one option is, I mean, you don't have to take action today on this. But I am a little concerned that the entities haven't submitted the claims yet. So
right.
We know what they're saying they're planning to do right now, but the claims haven't come in.
So it might be wiser to reschedule this item after the claims come in, and then if there are no claims, then we could dispense with the hearings and the findings?
Sure, we can do that at the same meeting if we, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is the deadline for the claims?
So we'll have them at the beginning of April, so we'll have them in a couple weeks. So we will have an item at a future meeting, either April or May, to deal with this issue.
Could I just also add that the county works with all of the local jurisdictions that provide transit, and we work closely to ensure that when there is a need that comes from the public, that we service that need as best to our ability. And so even without this process, I think I would hope that you could trust that we're going to work our hardest to ensure that we're providing transit and to the best of our ability. So.
Thank you.
Well, then maybe we could just make a motion that we move item 4C to our May meeting, and then we can see based on what the claims come in. If there are no claims, then we don't have to have the hearing.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, it's been moved and second to move this item to our, did you say May meeting, Ms. Lavanio? Or whenever?
That's the safer one. I'm not sure.
May?
Yeah, we'll
Okay.
put it on your May meeting.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none. Madam Clerk, you want to call the roll?
Director Williams? Aye. Hart?
Aye.
Hartman? Aye. Lavanino? Aye. Waite?
Yes.
Julian?
Aye.
Mosby? Aye. Perotti? Aye. Clark? Aye. Murillo?
Aye.
Sierra? Aye. And Chair Patino?
No.
No?
Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to then item number 6.
Item 6, Measure A Strategic Plan. 6A, receive presentation on Measure A Strategic Plan Financial Memorandum. 6B, approve recommendation from Technical Transportation Advisory Committee on preferred scenario number 2 for the Measure A Strategic Plan Financial Memorandum and accept the Measure A Strategic Plan Financial Memorandum. 6C, recommend to the SBCAG board that the SBCAG staff prepare and submit a Transportation Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act letter of interest to the United States Department of Transportation Build America Bureau.
Staff report is being made by Mr. Kachek.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, directors. Today we are presenting the Measure A Strategic Plan Financial Memorandum to your board. We are joined today by our peers from the Technical Transportation Advisory Committee, including TTAC Chair, Mr. Steve Moss. So if there are any questions of TTAC, they're more than happy to provide responses. The memorandum is attached to the staff report as attachment A. So some background, in May of 2018, we were notified of the award of $184 million in Senate Bill 1, Cycle 1 competitive funding for the US 101 multimodal corridor. We were committing to the California Transportation Commission and the state that we would have a match of Measure A funding for the funding. And then your board directed staff to work with TTAC on developing a update to the strategic plan, which included a development of a financial memorandum. And so the purpose of the financial memorandum was to see where we're at with the cash flow that we have for the Measure A program, see how much funding that we need for the match for the SB1 funding, and then see what we would have to do in terms of financing that match to make sure that we had the match, but to also make sure that we had enough capacity to provide funding to the local agencies and the other regional programs in terms of cash flow. So that was the purpose of the financial memorandum. Keep in mind, we also plan on doing a major update to the strategic plan in summer of 2020. We're going to be applying for Cycle 2 of the Senate Bill 1 programs probably in December and January of the next fiscal year, and we will know how much or how well we did in June of 2020. So that's the time frame that we're working on at this point. The assumptions in the financial memorandum, we want to make sure that we have a $5 million balance in the program after we do all the local pass-through and the regional funds, just in case something comes in terms of a large bill. But we all are very diligent in terms of monitoring the planned expenditures monthly or even weekly at this point with the 101 project gearing up. We have looked at projected revenues for a 10-year period. So the financial memo is looking at the 10-year period through 26-27, and that's how long we think the construction of the 101 is going to take if we are successful with the Cycle 2 awards. So for the 10-year period, we're looking at 2% projected revenue increase per year as an average for Measure A. After the 10-year period, we are going up to 3% through 3940. So keep in mind, we update the strategic plan every 5 years, but now as the 101 is gearing up, we're going to be doing pretty regular updates. The actual expenditures in the financial memo cash flow are through 2018, and then we are also looking at planned expenditures through 3940. So what we did was, we know that the local agencies get a certain percentage each year for their local Measure A program, and then the regional projects all have a certain percentage that they also receive. So that's the basis for us developing the financial memo. In terms of the development of the financial memo, as we plugged in all the numbers and worked with our financial advisor, KNN, we are noticing, or we are informed that there is going to be a need for financing to help us with the Measure A match and making sure the local programs are being delivered. In June of 2018, we did work with TTAC, and they did request that we examine the use of the RSTP reserve to help maybe potentially offset the need for outside financing for the Measure A strategic plan. And so we worked with TTAC since June. We've had many meetings and many versions of the strategic plan financial memo. It was a lot of bonding, if you want to call it bonding. But we've reached a point now where we narrowed it down to two scenarios. Scenario one is looking at bond financing or securing a bond, which we actually did under the Measure D program to help with delivery of those projects. Another option, which we're very intrigued by and pursuing, is a federal loan, which I'll talk about in a second. The second option, second scenario, was use of RSTP. We currently have about $26 million in RSTP reserve per board policy in 2010. That funding, it's It's federal surface transportation program funding. It's a very flexible program in terms of project eligibility. But then since we are a smaller region, it comes to us as state cash. And so we're able to utilize it in a lot more flexible ways than larger regions do. So we've been collecting the revenues, and it's been sitting in a separate account. We receive about $3 million per year after we give the local agencies their $1.8 million per year. So we're getting about $3 million per year that goes into the account. So these are the two scenarios that we looked at. There are obviously different ways to look at it. Bond financing, if you're going to be issuing a bond, that means we're going to be having to deal with debt payments, and those debt payments will be coming off the top of the Measure A program, and then that would impact everybody within the Measure A program. And so that's a really important point to bring up. Using RSTP would mean that we're not needing such a large bond. We're using the RSTP to offset a bond. We're still going to need a bond because we don't have enough RSTP over the 10-year period to take care of everything, but it minimizes the impact to local agencies and the regional projects. So in the financial memo, there is an extensive analysis on the two scenarios. This is something that our financial advisor, KNN, developed. As I mentioned, we worked with TTAC continuously to make sure that we were leaving no rock unturned in terms of what are the impacts, because obviously we don't want to impact the program as a whole. We want to see if there's any flexibility with providing the local agencies the revenues they need to deliver their programs. So this is a table that shows the comparison of the two scenarios. Scenario one, well, there is a first scenario, which is the base case, but base case technically just means if we're going to have a lot of expenses coming in over the 10-year period, it shows how much we're going to go in the red. And so we obviously don't want to just go into the red because that would be the worst case scenario. But scenario one, based on KNN's analysis, they determined that we would need two bonds over this period. The first one would be issued in fiscal year 21-22 of about $62 million, and the second bond would be in fiscal year 24-25 of approximately $45 million. In this scenario, there would be no RSTP reserve used. The total bond payments would be $162 million. And then the local pass-through amount would be $649 million. At the end of the 26-27 year, there would be approximately $63 million in the RSTP reserve. Under scenario two, which is a TTAC recommendation, there would be one bond. The reason for one bond is that we're using $42 million in RSTP over a 3-year period to help us make sure we're maintaining the necessary cash flow balance for Measure A. There you see the difference. The amount of funding going to the local agencies is significantly higher. We're looking at almost $700 million in pass-through to local agencies. And then at the end of the 10-year period, there's approximately $15 million that would still remain in the RSTP reserve. So this is what the scenarios are looking at. I just did want to show you what the debt service payments would look like for the two scenarios. So two bonds in scenario one. Total bonds issued would be $107 million. The total payments on the bond would be $37 million. And then after that, through 3940 would be about $125 million for $162 million total. And then under scenario two, where you're doing one bond with 3 lump sums of RSTP reserve, total bonds issued would be $61 million. Payments through 26-27 are $17 million. The payments thereafter are $73 million, and the total bond debt service would be $90 million. So those are the scenarios that were considered in the memo. We did meet with TTAC in March. We presented the updated financial memorandum. TTAC unanimously recommended that the board approve scenario two in terms of the financial memo, which we're presenting to you today. And then last but not least, we were at a conference in, I think, October or November of last year, and Director Hart, then Deputy Executive Director Hart, learned about the TIFIA option from another agency in Orange County. The TIFIA loan process is a federal loan from the government, so instead of doing issuance of bonds, we can get a federal loan. There are a couple of advantages with that. We could get a lower interest rate than issuing a bond. We assumed 5% bond interest rate in the memo. I think as of last week, the interest rate on a TIFIA loan is about 3.5%. The other advantage of using a TIFIA loan, which just keep in mind we are still exploring, is that it would be a pay-as-you-go. So we don't necessarily issue a bond and then need to start making payments and then spend those funds within 3 years. By doing a pay-as-you-go, if we know that maybe the big impacts on the cash flow program for Measure A are maybe a year or two later, then we just have to get those funds and then keep paying on the loan thereafter. So it's providing that advantage also. We've already started the process. Actually, we had a consultation call with the Build America Bureau with the U.S. Department of Transportation. They were pretty excited by the prospect of our project, actually, because larger regions, they're doing toll road projects. We're using, to help pay back the loan, we are using straight Measure A revenues to pay back the loan. So it's not as complicated for them. So it gives the federal government a win. It gives us a win because we have the need and they're able to provide it. So we are actually meeting next week on our federal legislative trip in Washington, D.C. with the director of the Build America Bureau. His staff has briefed him on that, and we are going to provide additional information. So we're hoping to get more positive feedback, and then after that, we will commence on development of an initial pre-application, if you will. It's called a letter of interest, and so we're going to provide the federal government with as much information as far as where we're at with our project and what our need is. We're also going to be advocating for the recent competitive grant we submitted for the infra program for our 101 HOV project. So we're hoping to get a lot of good feedback and be able to advocate for our needs in DC next week. So with that, the TTAC recommendation for your board today is unanimous recommendation to approve scenario 2 and to accept the financial memorandum. And then part B is a recommendation that staff prepare and submit a letter of interest to the U.S. Department of Transportation. With that, that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to take any questions or comments.
Any questions? Director Clark?
Thank you. Thank you for your report, Sarkis. Just refresh my memory. How do we get these reserves, and if we didn't use them for this offset purpose, where would those funds be intended to go?
So the Director Clark, through the chair, the RSTP reserves are currently, we receive them from the state and then they're set into an account. So currently they're in account. Before the board policy, the process was that we were doing a regional call for projects for the RSTP funding. And then per the 2010 strategic plan, the funds were then set into a reserve until the project was completed. So until the project is completed, it would be up to the board to decide on how to determine the process for allocating the RSTP funding.
Any other questions? Mr. Lavanino?
So, Sarkis, you said in June of 2020 we're going to find out how well we do on round 2 of SB1. So is SB1, so do we just get a formula for, I guess at the county, we get a formula, correct? I mean, how does SB1 work? Let's just figure that out. So
before I answer, I want to make sure there are many programs under SB1. So are you referring to the local streets and roads or to this competitive funding?
Okay, so that's the difference. So on local streets and roads, there's a formula, correct? Yes. And then on a separate thing, we go and compete?
Yes.
Okay, all right, that makes sense then. Thanks.
Any other questions? Director Hart?
I don't have any questions. I have a comment. I just think this is a really excellent strategy. It's great to see that TTAC and the SBCAG board staff have worked all these issues out and have a really logical cost-saving strategy that results in less money being diverted from the local agencies and less cost to the taxpayers from debt financing. And the TIFIA loan is just another added potential benefit from all this. We're lower interest rate, more directly connected to the borrowing timing, so we save money on interest. This is just a great news story, and it's another piece of the puzzle. The board was very wise looking ahead back when it set the initial policy to put these RSTP reserves in this account for this purpose, and we have been wildly successful in getting much more money from the state government than we initially planned on. And so this is really another example of a very long-term, smart planning strategy. And I think that having the TIFIA tool will give us a much better conversation with the federal government. We've been looking for a way for them to participate in this project. They have not been able to date, but this is a way they can. And I think this will help us in the conversations about the federal grants as well, because there's a connection now where we are partners potentially, and that could result in even more money to local taxpayers for this project from the federal government. So job well done.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
Yes, Madam Chairman.
Oh.
This ties into Director
Director
Hart's.
Waite? Okay.
Yes, thank you. This ties into Director Hart's comments. Presumably if we take the recommendation for scenario 2 from TTAC, does that or would that be able to combine with the TIFIA credit program? Should that be approved, or is it one or the other?
No, Director Waite, we would actually utilize, it would be sort of like a scenario 2 where instead of needing to bond, then we would be using the TIFIA loan in place of the bond. So it would be the combination of using the RSTP reserve and then getting a TIFIA loan in conjunction.
Okay, in conjunction. So
Yes.
we wouldn't, if we approved one process, we would not necessarily change over to the TIFIA. We would be utilizing the TIFIA
Yes.
with
Correct.
scenario 2.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, any public comment?
We have no public comment.
Thank you. So I'm ready for a motion.
I'll move the staff recommendation, or the TTAC recommendation.
I hear a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Director Williams?
Aye.
Hart?
Aye.
Hartman?
Aye.
Lavanino?
Aye.
Waite?
Yes.
Julian?
Aye.
Mosby?
Aye.
Parodi? Aye. Clark? Murillo?
Aye.
Sierra?
Aye.
And Chair Patino.
Aye.
Motion passes 12-0.
Madam
Thank
Chair, staff
Yes,
did
go
want to
ahead.
thank the local agencies and TTAC for working collaboratively with us on the process. It was, like we said, we worked on this since June together, so we're thankful for the collaboration.
Thank you very much. 1 minute reports. Let's see. You want to start with you, Mr. Clark?
Thank you, I got nothing.
Okay.
I'll let Mayor Patino talk about open streets.
Go ahead, Mr. Lavaney. You can talk. That's why I was giving it back to you. Director Parodi.
Nothing really before other than I just want to acknowledge the state of the city was fabulous today. Thank you, Kathy Murillo, Mayor Murillo. I really enjoyed it.
Director Hartman.
Let's see, our county public works roads department had a workshop in Burton Mesa to talk to people there and get ideas about what they see to improve their streets. And one question came up for Caltrans having to do with the 246 roundabout as one heads west, that in the fog, which is frequent there aren't any lights, and you approach it quickly not knowing, and so I promised that I would come to this meeting this week and mention that and get an answer what would be required to try to, in the fog, make that more visible.
Madam Chair, would you like me to handle that now?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so I will check into that. I don't have any answers off the top of my head, but that's something we'll look back into and follow up with you.
Thank you. Director Hart?
Supervisors Williams and Hartman brought forward an item this past Tuesday at the board agenda to have the county move toward electrification of the county's vehicle fleet. And the board unanimously passed an effort to do that, to move forward and have all the new passenger cars that the county purchases starting this fiscal year be electric vehicles. So we're going to have a great pilot project that we can show the results from and hopefully have cost savings in the long term from reducing greenhouse gas emissions and having electric vehicles in the county's fleet.
Thank you. Director Williams?
Well, I'll say a part of the conference for your executive director's report, but again, Ms. Kern, Mr. Sarkis, and Holly and I went to a conference this weekend. That was a mixed conference of CalCog and the Local Government Commission. I'm a board member of the Local Government Commission, and obviously all our CAGs and COGs are active in CalCog. And really the worst and most dire issue that the conference hit on several times was that we are experiencing a large growth statewide in vehicle miles traveled. We are not alone here in both the congestion challenges posed by the rise of VMT and the pollution challenges posed by the rise of VMT. And so much of that conference also looked at the housing element and how that interacts with growth of the VMT. So it is something that really threatens both the state of commerce in California and our ability to meet our climate goals. And I think the state is going to increasingly be looking at the strategy of housing close to jobs. And I think what that means is that the expectation will be far beyond RHNA, because nobody views RHNA as much more than a process that gets people all really pissed off over accomplishing very little. And what both seemingly the governor's office and the legislature expect is housing production. And I personally feel that it is imperative for us to do so in a manner that's good for our area so that we don't continue to face state mandates that dispense with local zoning authority. That really, this is going to be a choice of whether we can do it ourselves or whether it's forced and taken out of our hands.
Thank you. Director Mosby?
Yeah, I'll just give my minute to Doss, so.
I think all of you have already.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. So the City of Santa Barbara is starting to implement our Vision Zero policy, and we knew we would irritate people because when you prioritize safety, so that means, people are used to using the road the way they want to. We're making changes to Cabrillo Boulevard right by the volleyball courts. And I got in my car today to come to, the State of the City. Thank you, Mayor Perotti, for your compliment. And KTYD DJs were talking about it. We're going to get the mayor on the radio. And they were just really mad about this changes that we're making to the road. So if anybody's listening, I guess I'll go on the radio and talk about it. But we're also doing Vision Zero on Las Positas as well. So I always say, and the philosophy is there's no such thing as an accident, everything's preventable. So if we just slow down, right? And I have to say that to myself too. Don't leave late, leave a little early, and then you're not speeding around town. Our transportation planning department will hold a workshop on the west side of Santa Barbara to look at the traffic circulation and conditions over there. And we are getting ready to do the Chino Bike Boulevard, for those of you who were here for the update of our bicycle master plan. And then on a fun note, we did the Race of Gentlemen. I'm not sure if any of you came out. We closed a part of Cabrillo Boulevard for drag racing. And so just a tribute to people's attachment to vintage cars. And it was pretty cool of us, I thought. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Director Sierra.
That sounds like fun. Thank you. I had a great week the last week. I got to go to a CalCOG's annual conference with the Local Government Commission. Director Williams was there, and our executive director of CalCOG, Bill Higgins, did a really good job. And then we got back from there, and a day later, we went to Legislative Day, and Gus Corey did an amazing job, even got the governor to stop by and say hello, which was a real treat. And greenhouse gas, housing, transportation, a lot of conversation, and it'll be interesting to see. The governor says 2023 is when he's going to start, was the carrot and the stick, pretty much. So we've got a couple years before we find out what's going on. And I just wanted to thank Margie and Sarkis for taking such good care of me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I might
yes, go ahead, Mr.
add on to Doss's comments. Carpinteria is not like other towns in California. Maybe we're more like Santa Barbara, I don't know. But we are a tourist town. That's our economy. And we've done very, very well on our arena numbers. And I noticed that the stuff coming out of the state is going for a 10% affordable inclusionary. We're already doing 12% affordability ratio in Carpinteria, but our experience has been that the highest bidder on the non-affordable housing are people from out of town who want a second home or who want to do a short-term rental operation, and that's not really helping workers who are having to move elsewhere. And on the live-work situation, we had an opportunity to try that out with a project, and our experience was there's really no way you can guarantee that the person who lives near to the job is not going to get a job another town down the road, or that they're even going to take the transportation. So I mean, I think these are good ideas. They just there needs to be better ways to implement them. I know this is, I have a friend who's a council person in the Victoria, BC area. Of course, that's Canada, but they've actually put conditions on if you buy a house as a second home in terms of extra taxation to help local housing efforts. Anyway.
Thank you. Up in North County, Director Waite.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I just want to very quickly touch on the fact that we had our North County regional meeting in the Solvang chambers, and I was quite pleased to hear that Clean Air Express is considering a route from the 154 through the main corridor of Solvang into Buellton. So that was really good to hear, something that they're looking at because our local transportation is important. It's a hot topic with me. Also, we had a successful bicycle master plan meeting in the Solvang City Council chambers, large turnout for that. And then finally, I rode in the Solvang Century, and that was on the 9th. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I covered a lot of roads on that ride, and this is, I guess, something that I'd have a bone to pick with Caltrans and the county regarding a number of the roads that haven't actually been discussed in any of the meetings that I've been in, but we can touch on those later. One of those would be Drum Canyon, to name a number one road that really needs improvement. But other than that, that's it for my reports. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Julian?
Yeah, briefly, our core department heads and administrative staff are now filled there in the community of Guadalupe, at least until the end of this fiscal year. And we're looking forward to working with, starting our budget process and goal setting. And also on a positive note, with CAL FIRE, we're subject, as is Water Park, subject that we've asked for money to actually buy and plant 400 trees, 200 in Guadalupe and 200 in Water Park. And if anybody is, we also are going to plant another 37 trees April 6th, if anybody wants to give a hand at O'Connell Park. And I know the Supervisor Hartman, I think you did your trek along the levee, and we want to partner with that process as far as access to the dunes.
Thank you. In Santa Maria, as Mr. Lavanino alluded, we will be having the open streets on Sunday, March 31st. And so we'll be closing down West Main Street from Broadway all the way to Blosser. So businesses will be coming out, I guess, on the curb. We have the Foursquare Church is going to be there. We have all kinds of people that will be the city will be giving out information on some of the resources that we have in the city. So it'll be open streets, and that's March 31st, and you're all welcome to come up to Santa Maria. So it'll just be bicycles or skateboards and pedestrians there. So watch out for the skateboards, I guess. I don't think we have many, I don't see many scooters around. Director Parodi?
I just want to make one quick announcement that with my MTD hat on, I'd like to make an announcement that on March 27th, am I correct here? I think so. March 27th, MTD will be celebrating their 50th anniversary. And at the office, they will have, they'll have 11 to 1 o'clock, but at 11:30 there'll be a program, and it's they'll be having a pop-up museum with a lot of history. So I just want to make sure I make that announcement. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, we'll go to the Executive Director's Report. Mrs. Kern.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, members of the board. Well, February 28th seems so long ago, but I haven't seen, the board hasn't met since then, but we had our scooter summit on February 28th, and I want to give a big thank you to Directors Joan Hartman and Greg Hart for giving the closing statement. I think it was a productive day, heard a lot of good information, good dialogue, and you'll see, we'll talk about next steps at a future meeting. We also had 2 bike workshops in the Santa Ynez Valley, one in Solvang and Buellton. I hear they were very well attended. So again, you'll see follow up on that, on the priorities for the bike plan. The Yosemite Regional Leadership Conference with CalCog and the Local Government Commission was a 4-day great trip in Yosemite. Can't beat the location. Got some really good hiking in as well as the good information and great presentations. Thank you for Director Sierra for representing SBCAG and Supervisor Williams for attending. Yesterday we had a very, very busy day in Sacramento with the Central Coast Coalition. We had a great itinerary meeting with all of our representatives and agencies that we work very closely with, and obviously the highlight was meeting the governor of our state, very personable gentleman, and I think we were very well received and had a great conversation there. And then on Monday, we leave for our DC trip, so it never ends here. We'll be a week or a few days in DC advocating for our infra grant that we recently submitted at the beginning of this month. We asked for $25 million of the federal grant program, and you never know. Maybe this time. And then we'll also talk about our TIFIA loan options and advocating for that as well. So thank you again for the chair, vice chair, and past chair for representing SBCAG on this trip. I think it will be another productive week with SBCAG. And so that's on my report. So I'll answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, moving on to the Caltrans District Director's report. Mr. Eads.
Hey, Madam Chair, members of the board, Scott Eads here for Tim Gubbins, who's in Sacramento today. Have 3 items for you. The first is an update on, First is an update on 192. 5 of the 7 bridges are open to traffic, some of those with one-way traffic control. Work is continuing on many of the bridges in terms of the bridge rails and other aspects of them. The 2 that remain are Arroyo Paradon and Montecito Creek. Arroyo Paradon, we're looking at mid-April for an opening date for traffic, and Montecito Creek, we're hoping to have that open by July. I want to give a shout out to the District 5 Active Transportation Plan. I've mentioned this in the past. Just a couple more things to highlight about it. The plan is developing a full inventory of bikeways on the state highway system in District 5, as well as sidewalks, so that'll be a good kind of a base layer of information. We're also gathering information from members of the public through a couple different means. One is through attending events, and the other is a crowdsourcing application that will be coming online. We'll give information about that once it's fully up and running. But 2 different types of opportunities to provide input from the public. Our first actual event that we're going to be attending is the Open Streets Festival on the 31st. So we'll have some folks there. We'll have some survey information, just gathering information on where people ride their bikes and where they're using the state highway system for bicycle and pedestrian activities, areas that they say needs. We'll have surveys in both English and Spanish, as well as English and Spanish speakers there. Let's see here. Last thing that I wanted to highlight is the California Transportation Foundation released their Excellent in Transportation initial awards. One was given to Caltrans amongst a number of other districts for their emergency response efforts throughout the state. So certainly that had to do with last year's response in Montecito, as well as others on the Big Sur coast. And then there was also a public outreach category that was specific to the public outreach efforts associated with the closures on 101 in Montecito last year. And so we're a finalist in that category. The actual awards for these finalist categories will be provided out, or will be announced on May 28th. So that's all I have today. I'd be happy to answer.
Mr. Eads, let me ask you a question. We'll have the open streets on 166 West Main Street. What are you going to do about the trucks that come down on East Main Street going to Guadalupe?
Well, I suspect that we approved a
detour plan?
A detour plan as part of the application for the event to be able to do the closure. So usually those things are well thought out. I don't know the specific detour plan, but I'm sure that was part of the approval for the event and the closure.
Yeah, I just thought, yeah, we'll send them through Steve's neighborhood. Yeah, I was just wondering if that had been thought out.
Okay, I'd be happy to follow up with information on that.
Thank you very much. Okay. Moving on now to committee meetings, CRCC, which is a Coast Rail Coordinating Council. Director Murillo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as a reminder, this is a joint powers authority, and it includes Santa Cruz, Monterey, San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, and Ventura transportation agencies. And we have representatives from Caltrans and LoSan with the goal of improving passenger rail in the central part of California. We met March 8th in Santa Barbara. I was elected vice chair. And because the group has confirmed its bylaws and is an official GPA, we applied for and got $660,000 a grant, and that'll go to improvements in the corridor. And apparently Union Pacific is talking about selling parts of the corridor, and that's a possibility, so we're aiming high. It's just all talk right now, but just to let you know, that's the talk. LoSan had some interesting things to say. I know Director Hart's going to talk later. I'll just cover what we heard in relation to Goleta, that they're looking at adding a layover there for the Surfliner. I think that's it. I'm really enjoying this task. And thank you for appointing me to the assignment. Thank you.
Thank you. And the Calvans board meeting was canceled. So moving on to LoSAN, Director Hart.
Madam Chair?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Director
okay.
Julian.
It was canceled, as you're aware, and the next meeting is April 11th. And I was in speaking with Director Hughes, he mentioned that Santa Barbara County will actually have about 100 units out in our county, and somewhat less in Ventura County. But look forward to our next meeting on the 11th.
Thank you. Director Hart.
At the March LoSAN board meeting, there were a couple items of interest. There was a second quarter budget status report that just outlined the financial situation of LoSAN, and they're on track for their budget, although there are seasonal anomalies that get adjusted over the course of the year. There were also rail-to-rail agreements with Metrolink and Coaster that were signed that allow passengers on the Pacific Surfliner to transfer to Metrolink or to Coaster rail services and vice versa, so that really expands the utility of those services for passengers. And as Director Murillo mentioned, there is a cooperative agreement was approved between Amtrak and LoSAN for expansion of the Goleta layover facility. There's going to be new capacity there for additional train storage that will facilitate future expansion of the system, and LoSAN is very committed to working with the City of Goleta on making sure that project works well in the community, in addition to working for the LoSAN service.
Thank you. So moving on, item number 11, communications. Is there any no reporting communications? Okay, this meeting will then be adjourned till Thursday, April 18th, 2019, 10 o'clock in Santa Maria. Thank you.
Thank you.